Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. We're doing a series of spotlights on remarkable experts across the country and even in your town. Joining me on this segment is Beau Armistead. He's the founder of Sojourn Counseling. Beau, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Beau, tell us a little bit about your work and specifically the types of folks that you work with.
hmm Yeah, so Sojourn Counseling, we are located in Birmingham, Alabama, and we're a nonprofit counseling practice, working with clients kind of all across the board. My particular specialty is working with clients who live with a history of trauma and might possibly be living with PTSD.
Right on. So tell me a little bit. Can you give us a couple examples of some of the challenges that your clients might face when they come to see you?
Sure. So again, specifically working with people with a history of trauma and PTSD, the majority of my clients are living in a state of hypervigilance, and so a lot of times dealing with flashbacks and nightmares, or just a heightened sense of anxiety throughout the day, every day. So just kind of makes navigating life more difficult, makes relationships more difficult, depending on what what particular they're dealing with in day-to-day life as it pertains to their trauma.
Are folks aware of like what they need to do to overcome these types of challenges, or what are some of the myths and misconceptions that might be out there that may keep people from seeking help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of times, by the time people come to me for help, they have lived for years with PTSD or just the effects of the trauma has had on their life. And oftentimes, those people think there's no help, there's no possibility for help. They've tried certain things, they've been on diets and exercise, and they've seen various counselors or whatever. And there are some particular modalities that we use here that are specifically designed to help heal someone, heal a brain from trauma, really. And so, really, I guess some of the biggest myths are there's not help available for someone living with PTSD.
Can you give us some insights into some of those modalities and how specifically they work to help folks overcome their challenges?
Sure. So, just a quick explanation on how our brain interacts with trauma. So, our brains don't process trauma the way they process anything else. And so, we can go through any kind of normal day, any normal life experience, and our brain is able to process that information and file it away at the end of the day. That's what happens during REM sleep. Um, However, if we experience a traumatic event during a day, our brain's not able to process that information and actually holds on to that information for a very specific purpose. So if we experience something traumatic, our brain wants to hold all that information in place so that it can constantly be aware of what the potential threat might be in the future so that we don't encounter that threat again. And so it holds on very tightly to all the details, the sights, sounds, smells, physical sensations, emotions, everything connected to that trauma is held very tightly in the brain um, in order to protect us, but also it causes a place of hypervigilance um, and a constant awareness and heightened anxiety. And so because our brains can't process those things normally, there are certain modalities of therapy. Specifically, one that I use every day is called EMDR therapy, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And that basically mimics what goes on during REM sleep. It's a bilateral stimulation, often used with eye movements, that allows the brain to enter into processing a way it can't do on its own, and file away those traumatic events the same way it's filed away other information that has been properly filed away.
Fantastic, terrific insight. Beau, tell us a little bit about like what are some of the mistakes people make or the pitfalls that people can avoid when they're working on themselves and working on overcoming their challenges?
Yeah. So another good question. I think that, gosh, a lot of things. I think one, it's hard to have hope. It's hard to have hope when you've lived for years in this place and haven't experienced healing. And so I always encourage people just to hold on to a little bit of hope because based on my experience and years of this kind of therapy, I see people healing every day. And so, if you can have a little bit of hope in that, to hold on to hope and not to continue to hold on to this sense of hopelessness, although it's easier said than done, especially when you've lived for years in a certain way. But I encourage people to hold on to hope. Encourage people to avoid behaviors that we know aren't helpful. So a lot of people have a hard time sleeping when they're living in a state of hypervigilance or living with PTSD. Sleep doesn't come easy because your brain's constantly trying to keep you aware and awake of potential threats that might be around you. Therefore, when you go try to get to sleep tonight, at night, it's not easy. So I encourage people to have very sort of strict sleep routine, what we call sleep hygiene, certain things you can do to help yourself get to sleep at night so that you can more easily get to that place of REM sleep and help your brain do the processing it needs to, which allows you to have less anxiety during the day, which can actually cause you to sleep better the next night, and it can turn to a good cycle. So encourage good sleep habits, encourage people to avoid substances that typically they turn to help kind of numb their pain. Oftentimes that just makes matters worse because there's not healing that's taking place in that. It's just kind of feeling better in the moment. And so really seeking out professional help wherever you are in order to get the healing that you need.
I appreciate that sage advice and very specific. I appreciate that. Beau, tell us what inspired you to get into this line of work? How'd you get started?
Well, that's another great question. I was part of an organization for years where I traveled around the United States. We had what we called nomad supply. We spent a lot of time on the road with nomadic people, nomadic subcultures, people who live on the road, live in national forests, live out of their vehicles, live in train yards, hopping freight train. In years of spending time with this nomadic subculture, I realized that a lot of people are living current life out of past events. So living a lot of how life is being lived now is based on things they've experienced in the past, oftentimes traumatic events. And so after years and years and years of seeing sort of the same story in different ways through a lot of people's lives, just was real motivated to further my training, better equip myself to try to help people work towards healing. And so specifically, when I got into mental health counseling, my heart has always been to help people heal from trauma because of years of seeing people live lives out of past trauma.
Absolutely terrific. I can tell you're extremely passionate and knowledgeable about the subject. So, Beau, for our listeners out there that are tuning in right now and resonate with your message and would like to connect with you, how do they connect with you and find more?
Sure. Our web address is sojourncounseling.org. And so that's, people often ask me how to spell Sojourn. It's Sojourn. Sojourncounseling.org is our web address. And that's the quickest, easiest way to find out information about us, our practice, and also just more information about, trauma, PTSD, EMDR therapy, and these things that we talk about a lot around here.
I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you, Sojourn Counseling, and for all of your clients.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's great to be with you.
Beau Armistead, founder of Sojourn Counseling. This segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy entrepreneurs, professionals, and business owners publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for tuning in.